So my name is Steve Wilson. I am the Chief Product Officer at Contrast Security. I think she mentioned it, but you can go over and see us at the booth. If you want to get more information on this, see live demos, please come and visit us over there. But we're going to focus in on really talking about how to develop more secure applications. So when we think about the worries that you have when you are trying to secure modern applications, there's a lot of things that have changed in recent years that are different than the way you may have approached this 10 years ago. First off, we're developing code faster. When you are deploying to the cloud, you're going to be using agile development technologies. You're going to be using CI/CD pipelines. You need tools and security technologies and techniques that are going to keep up with your velocity. You're going to need to think about how do you shift left? How do you get out of the mode where you have separate development and security teams where you're throwing code over the wall, and then the security teams are coming back later and dumping tickets on your head, disrupting your development schedules, and making life hard on you. And I'll tell you a quick story. In my last job before joining Contrast, we slipped all of our schedules on a major project once by a whole quarter because the security team got a new set of security scanning tools, ran scanning tools on all the code, filed 1,000 Jira tickets for security problems, none of which turned out to be real. But the amount of time, effort, and strife that you had to go through to sort through that was positively puzzling. So when you're in these CI/CD pipeline worlds and you're going through this sort of older technique, this waterfall technique, life's relatively simple. But as you move faster, you start to incur more risks. And really, these security processes get in your way and start to slow down you as development teams. This inaccuracy is a major problem, and it's something we'll talk about, which is those older tools that do code scanning generally don't have enough context to give you really valid results. Those are tools that were designed for security researchers, not agile development teams. You need to use what we call an inside-out approach, where you're actually embedding instrumentation inside your applications, which is going to give you sufficient context to understand your security risks at runtime. And really, the fact of the matter is, if you're not getting that kind of context, you're going to develop a false sense of security. So this better way is thinking about coming at this from the inside out, embedding security instrumentation into your applications, right into your cloud environment that's going to give you real-time telemetry that's going to help you understand those security risks. At Contrast, we develop what we call a secure code platform that works in a number of environments. It works in more traditional, say, app server-based environments with languages like Java and .NET, where you may have millions of lines of legacy code. But it also works in more modern environments like serverless applications, cloud-native applications, applications based on technologies like Kubernetes. But really what this is going to allow you to do is understand and articulate your security risks at a much better level. And that's going to be important both for your development teams and your security teams. And it's going to allow you to build both faster and more secure. So let's get into a real-world example here. How many of you remember the Log4Shell crisis back in December last year? So for those of you who don't, Log4j is a 20-plus-year-old piece of well-loved, slightly neglected Java code that's embedded in something like 10 million applications around the world. And towards the end of last year, right before the holidays, we all discovered that there were some major vulnerabilities in that piece of code. This taught us a few lessons. One is, you need to be looking at the full supply chain. So not just the code that you write, but also the code that you're taking in. And you need to be able to look at those both together. And that's going to help you ensure your overall operational security. So with the Contrast Secure Code platform, one of the things we look at are what are called the OWASP vulnerabilities. If you're familiar with OWASP, it's an organization dedicated to helping developers like yourselves understand the types of vulnerabilities that developers build into their code and how to avoid them and how to correct them. And our tools are built around some of those same principles and can help you instantly identify and protect yourself from those. And what we in fact do is give you much more accurate results with this inside-out technology. And that's going to allow you to move a lot faster. So, as promised, let's get into the details of what this means for serverless applications. So, first thing is, why is serverless so interesting? How many of you out there are developing serverless applications today? This is good. All right, more than half of you. From my perspective, I was actually an early member of the Java team at Sun way back in the 90s when we developed things like the Java web server and servlets. And that was a big advance in terms of the efficiency that you could drive because you weren't spinning up a separate process every time you wanted to serve a web page. In many ways, every development environment since then has copied that at some level. Serverless applications like AWS Lambda are the biggest departure from that has happened in the last 20 years. The idea that you can actually really just spin things up on demand, just pay for what you need, means that you can be far more scalable, far more cost efficient than you can be with those traditional app server-based workloads. But this comes with some responsibility for you as a developer when it comes to securing your applications. Because while some of the considerations you make for a serverless environment are the same that you might have made for a traditional app server-based environment, there are some really different considerations. And so what we do is provide you a set of tools that look primarily at these three areas. And we'll get into them a little bit, but one of them, if you see, is looking at your custom code. So it's the actual code that you write in your serverless functions. How do we look at that code? And basically, we embed ourselves into your AWS account so that we can see the interconnections between your environments. We can see your serverless functions, your S3 buckets, and map that all out. And we can actually look at that code and the data that flows through it and alert you to some of these same kind of vulnerabilities that you've been on the lookout in traditional apps. So things like injection problems, SQL injection, command injection, basically ways that people are going to try and get untrusted data or instructions into your application. We can help map that out where you're vulnerable. The next one is finding vulnerabilities in your open source code. So if we go back and think about Log4j, serverless environments, you can pull all sorts of open source code in there. That's great, right? It's built on the same languages and technologies that you built applications with before. But you need to be able to understand how those open source environments or those open source components are coming into your environment and what they mean in that context. So we can link together your custom code and your open source code and give you a picture. And then there's one entirely new one, which is what we call over-permissive functions. So when we look at this here, we can actually give you pictures that look like this, where you see here combinations of your Lambda functions, your data buckets, your database connections, and how those all map together. And that gives you a picture where we can tag vulnerabilities in certain areas, but you might want to then assess how critical is that vulnerability. We can help you assess the criticality of it by, for example, saying, hey, this vulnerable function is attached to a critical data resource. So that's going to be something that's going to be higher on my priority list to fix. The other thing you could do is actually see what we call the blast radius of this, where if there was a vulnerability in a certain area of your code, what is that attached to and what data does that potentially expose? The other thing that we really do here is look at the permissioning of these functions. And because we can see all of the interconnections between all of the different types of functions and data sources, we can understand the identity and access management rights that each Lambda function needs. Now, why is this important? You know, as developers, we often start with a premise of, I just want to get the code to work. And so things like restricting the access privileges between functions makes it harder to get things to work, because I may have data flows and accesses that bounce off because I don't have the rights for certain things to call other things. And as developers, we all know this. People are going to do things like say the permissions to this is just star. Anybody can access it. But you have to remember, these are not Java methods inside an app server buried somewhere. These are functions running on the internet. These are out there, and unless you restrict them, they're available for anyone to call. So you want to lock down the identity and access management rights to your functions. But how do you know what to restrict it to? What groups, what types, what other functions? So one of the things that Contrast tools do for you is, again, looking inside that environment and understanding the full graph of your application, we can give you the exact privileges that each function needs, the exact minimum set of privileges, your least privileged set for each function. And we'll actually just give you a little snippet of code that you can copy and paste right into the AWS console that's going to help you lock down all of those functions to the minimum accessible piece. So to sum this up, what we want to provide to you is a set of tools that are going to make your life easy. We want to make this simple. So really, to embed this technology into your serverless environment, it's just 3 clicks. You're going to basically put us into the AWS environment, provide us some credentials so that we can get hooked up. And at that point, we're going to be continuously scanning. Every update to your application is going to get automatically scanned for new security vulnerabilities. Anytime there's a new CVE that gets logged against one of the open source components that you have in your application, you're going to get alerted to that. So whether it's your custom code, your open source code, or changes in your identity and access management provisioning, you're covered right away. And it's really easy both for security teams and for developers. The next one is to make this really relevant. How do we give you those contextual results? The thing that kills development teams is when they get this deluge of security things they need to look at that don't have context. By living inside the environment, we can give you the exact context, says here's the problem, here's why it's severe or not so severe, and here's how you can prioritize it, here's how you can attack it. And then this is really going to give you the posture, not just the findings. And then ultimately what we want to do is give you the full visibility of it. So not just what one developer needs to see, although that's important. We give you what your security team needs to see to fully certify that that environment is secure. So we give you organization-wide visibility into your AWS account and all of the serverless functions and data sources that are attached to them. That's going to give you coverage where you're going to get SCA, basically covering your open source. We're going to give you what you need that you would get from separate SAST and DAS tools, except those don't work in serverless environments. You need to take those tools and really retool them for serverless, which is what we've done. And we're going to give you that complete permission analysis. So just to wrap this up, if you want to check us out, Contrast is about 8 years old. We have hundreds of the world's largest organizations who are using us today to secure their environments, both their traditional and legacy environments, as well as now their cloud native and serverless environments. We get great reviews. Talk to your peers. Come visit us over at the booth. We'd love to give you some demos. And we have a couple Contrast folks who will be down in front to answer questions. So thanks a lot.